Hello and welcome to the Book Club Review. I'm Kate, and this is the podcast about book clubs and the books that get people talking. We love book clubs on this show, and the Booker Prize might be the most elite book club of them all. Chaired this year by novelist Roddy Doyle, with a touch of A-list celebrity sparkle from Sex and the City star and lifelong lover of books, Sarah Jessica Parker, among the other 5 judges. As usual, we'll be diving into the shortlist, and this year we're recording on the night of the announcement itself, so you'll hear our hot take reactions to the winner. But before that, we're turning our attention to the long list, the books that didn't make the cut. Were they unfairly overlooked or rightly left behind? Helping me decide are journalist and pod regular Phil Chaffee, and I'm welcoming a new voice to the show, Elizabeth Eva Leach, fellow and tutor in music at St Hugh's College and lecturer at Exeter College, Oxford, and a member of our Patreon book club. She's the only other person I know who reads as much as Phil Chaffee, and that's saying something. Like me, Phil and Elizabeth have been busy reading this year's shortlist, but unlike me, they have also read the long list. So who better to fill me in on the ones that didn't make the cut? The near misses, the overlooked gems, the bold experiments that maybe divided the judges. Join us as we consider the best of the rest. All that coming up here on the Book Club Review. Elizabeth, Phil, thanks so much to you both for joining me.
Delighted.
It's great to be here.
Elizabeth, you've been a member on our Patreon for a while now, and we have a currently reading chat thread where people often post the books that they have on the go. And it didn't take me long to realise that you are an absolutely phenomenal reader. Have you always been such a prolific reader?
When I was a child, I read like crazy. As I got older, I still was reading quite a lot, but I think probably as an undergraduate, I was busy doing other things. I've come back to reading a huge amount, really ever since I started listening to the Backlisted podcast. That got me back into it in about 2015, that kind of time. And since then, I've been reading about 200 books a year. Is what I get up to.
And I know this is a cliche question, but it is so hard to blot out all the distractions of modern life and focus. And I am always interested in people who read a lot. Have you got any tips for anyone who wants to read more?
I read a lot of different books simultaneously, and I find that helps me because I think we are all quite distracted. It is quite difficult to concentrate on a single thing. So I find that I read a certain book until I find my attention drifting. And then I think actually a change is as good as a rest, and I can change to a different book and then concentrate on that. I also read both visually and by listening to audio. I'm a great fan of audio, but the sorts of things I can really enjoy on audio are often different books from the ones I'd rather read visually. It's to do with the level of attention and concentration. I'm much better at taking information in orally than visually. So I really need to want to read the book and be sitting down and concentrating to do the actual visual reading.
You do have a lot in common, you two, because Phil is also, you take books on long walks, don't you? The audiobook is your friend.
Indeed it is. And in spare moments.
Other than that, is there anything else that you do to help carve out time for reading?
No, I mean, I don't have little kids or kids at all. I think that probably carves out a lot of time.
I don't have children either, but I do have a dog, which is also useful for making me go on the long walks.
I think I always underestimate the amount of time that I'm actually occupied with my children. It's true, it does cut into your reading time, but I never somehow factor that in when I'm like, why don't I manage to read more? I am extremely grateful that you are both such phenomenal readers, as it means that you can tell me all about the Booker Longlist books that I have not had time to get to. And let's not forget, the whole Booker's Dozen long list of 13 books is a list of best books from around 150 books that have been submitted. It's often the case, I think, that some really good books don't make the shortlist. I was thinking of Trust by Hernan Diaz, which was longlisted but not shortlisted a couple of years ago. And historically, there are lots of examples of books that have proved themselves over time but which didn't make the shortlist. The Blue Flower by Penelope Fitzgerald, longlisted but not shortlisted. Also, Never Let Me Go by Kazuo Ishiguro. So this is the show about making sure that we're not overlooking anything. As I mentioned, the judges are chaired by critically acclaimed writer and 1993 Booker Prize winner Roddy Doyle. Doyle's fellow judges are Booker Prize longlisted novelist Ayobami Adebayo, award-winning actor, producer and publisher Sarah Jessica Parker, writer, broadcaster and literary critic Chris Power, and New York Times bestselling and Booker Prize longlisted author Kylie Reid. Feels like a particularly writer-heavy panel this year. The only person without a book to their name is SJP, and she publishes them. So I'll be curious to see how that affects the books they've selected. Elizabeth, do you trust writers when it comes to evaluating fiction?
I think so, yes. I think they know what makes a good book. Obviously, it depends on the writer. I'm really pleased with the list this year. I thought the overall long list, I don't normally read everything on the long list. I normally dip in and out. But this year, it just seemed like a whole load of very interesting books.
Phil, how about you? What was your impression?
I have not read the whole thing before, and I'm 2 away. I have 2 of the shortlist to read still.
Me too.
It feels actually a bit spotty to me. It feels very hit and miss, which probably true of all on this.
I don't know. I worry a bit about writers judging books because I think they look for different things. And I also think they are so hyper aware of how the sausage is made, so to speak. I don't always think that they're the best judge of a book that will really land with readers.
I mean, that may be a reason that none of the debuts made it onto the shortlist. That was something that did strike me, is that I think the writers can see a debut, and even a good debut is still a debut novel. Maybe that could explain why we're going to be talking about a lot of debuts.
I also think there's some books that are writers' books. They're the book like some bands or the bands other musicians like. And some of these books have that feeling of this was not written for the general public, one of which I think we'll talk about today.
Yeah, and Audition, which we won't talk about today, I think is a writer's writer.
Exactly. That was my example from the shortlist.
Yeah.
Yes, we'll get to that one day. Before we get to those long-listed books, let me just take a moment to tell you about some reading lamps that might really enhance your experience of reading, like they have mine. Over the winter in the Northern Hemisphere, we're all going to be reading a lot by artificial light. But have you noticed how much harder your eyes need to work? Having to stop reading due to eye strain can be incredibly frustrating, but serious readers believe the problem is often down to the poor quality of most artificial light. They've developed lamps that are precision reading tools designed to bring the full, clear spectrum of natural daylight indoors. Like everyone else I know who has one, I could not imagine being without my Serious Readers lights. I have one for my desk and one beside my bed, and I'm aware of how much easier it is to read without my eyes getting tired. And I also love the way I feel they help me maintain steady focus. On the technical side, they use their trademark daylight wavelength technology to replicate the full clear spectrum of daylight. This makes words on the page appear sharper and with better contrast, reducing the feeling of strain. And they're recommended by over 500 opticians for that reason. Precision reading lamps are an investment, it's true, but Book Club Review listeners can get the brilliant special offer of £150 off any HD Essential reading light, plus free UK delivery. Go to seriousreaders.com/BCR and use the code BCR at checkout. That's Bravo Charlie Romeo. It's completely risk-free with a 30-day home trial. If you don't feel the difference, they'll collect for free and fully refund you. So head to seriousreaders.com/BCR and use that code BCR at checkout for £150 off any HD Essential reading light. Okay, with no more ado, let's find out about that Booker Longlist. In the order they appear on the Booker website, first up is Misinterpretation by Ledia Joga. The Booker judges say a Kosovan torture survivor requests translation assistance at his therapy sessions. Our narrator, a nameless translator, reluctantly agrees, but Alfred's account of his experiences conjures hidden memories that seep into her psyche, forcing her to question her marriage and her place in the world. This is the story of a woman saddled between her Albanian past and her New York present. It explores the way that language is kept in our bodies, how it can reveal truths we aren't ready to hear. Misinterpretation subtly blurs the distinction between help and harm. We found it propulsive, unsettling, and strangely human. Misinterpretation is narrated by Morgan Hallett. Here's a clip.
The dentist was only a 10-minute walk from the park. We walked there silently and at some distance from each other, like a couple who had just quarreled. In no time at all, we were filling out paperwork. On a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being the highest rating, how would you rate your dental health? On a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being the highest rating, where would you like your dental health to be? The questions struck Alfred as ridiculous. He opened his eyes incredulously and shook his head in disbelief. He then jutted his chin toward the papers, giving me full power of attorney over his dental history. Judging from his reaction, I opted for the lower numbers. He nodded in approval. Still hoping that some questions might resonate with him, I kept reading aloud. Do you brush your teeth in the morning or at night? Or both? He was indifferent, eager to dismiss such useless formalities to deal with a toothache that had kept him up all night. He gave a deep sigh, as if to say, it's true that my dental hygiene and genetics have contributed to the state of my teeth, but do they need every single detail? Realizing there were many more pages to go through, the pile on my lap did look intimidating, he glanced around with doubt. What kind of dentist would make us do all this?
I didn't know anything about this one. I had not heard of this author before. Phil, were the judges right to longlist it?
Yeah, I thought this was a fascinating one. I had expected from that description it would be a lot more about war trauma and things like that, which it isn't. It is just a fascinating exploration of intercultural interactions and her own relationship. It's much more set in Brooklyn and New York, and there's a bit elsewhere, but it's a very different novel than I was expecting, but I thought it was very rich and lots of themes to talk about.
I agree. I was expecting torture to be recounted. I was a bit scared about this. A few years ago, I was quite traumatized when they shortlisted The Good Doctor. It was 2003, Damon Galgurt's one, which had loads of horrible recountings of torture scenes. There is a mention of torture, but I don't think it needs a trigger warning. I think it's about the trauma rather than getting the reader to re-experience the trauma. What I found about this one, I felt it really had too much in it. It did seem like a debut because it was actually not overwritten, but it's overpacked with stuff. I found it the easiest one to read, actually. It was the last one from the long list that I read before the shortlist came out. But in a way, it's left the least trace in my memory. I didn't find it particularly stuck with me, but I enjoyed it at the time. I think it is quite an enjoyable read. It's a lot about an immigrant's relationship to her own community, whom she's trying to help in various ways through her translation work and so on, but also her own sorrow about her mother, who is clearly traumatized and is back in the home country. There is a scene that's set in Tirana, back in Albania. So it's an interesting book.
I had a little look on Goodreads, and Goodreads reviewer called Doug said, I strongly suspect this is championed by Booker judge Kylie Reid, since it's very similar in tone and style to her own Booker-nominated Such a Fun Age, which I thought was interesting.
No,
Yeah,
I don't.
You're both frowning, but...
I don't quite see the similarity. I was actually comparing it in my head a lot more to Katie Kitamura's previous book, Intimacies, the one about the translator in The Hague, and a lot of the thematics really overlap. This one, there's a bit more plot to grab onto.
Yeah, that's interesting, actually. A 5-star review, Celine Nguyen, said it's like Katie Kitamura's Intimacies, but with thriller-level plot velocity.
There we go.
I love this. Was reading it on the train, walking on and off the train, probably dangerous, walking to work and walking from work. The characters all feel sufficiently noble and hypocritical, weak of will and strangely indomitable in their integrity. I felt myself very attached to everyone at the end.
I find it a strange thing that she said it was like a thriller in its pacing, because I actually found this quite slow-paced and interior. There's a lot of action in it, a lot of things happen, but even when the supposedly scary things happen, because there's a point where she intervenes with somebody's stalker in a way that is borderline dangerous, it actually doesn't seem that scary. So thriller, I didn't get that at all from it.
It is endlessly fascinating how different books land with different people, isn't it? I also pulled out, Gigi gave it 1 star. She said, an atonal novel, so dry, flat, dull, and unremarkable that it had to get longlisted for the Booker. Let's move on to book 2, which is Sea Scraper by Benjamin Wood. The Booker judges said, Sea Scraper seems at first to be a beautifully described account of the working day of a young man, Thomas Flett, who works as a shanker in a north of England coastal town, scraping the Irish seashore for scrimps. And that is it. The details of the job and the physicality of the labour are wonderfully captured by Benjamin Wood. But this novel becomes much more than that. It's a book about dreams, an exploration of class and family, a celebration of the power and the glory of music, a challenge to the limits of literary realism, and, stunningly, a love story. The audiobook is read by Benjamin Wood himself and published by Penguin. Here's a clip.
There's all sorts in the water now that wasn't there when he was just a lad. Strange chemicals and pesticides and sewage. Barely a few weeks ago, there was a putrid fatty sheen upon the sand from east to west. A month before, he waded in a residue of foam that reeked of curdled milk as he approached the shallows. Fleeting things, but if you're asking him, they augur trouble. It's been hard to sleep of late. His dreams are full of slag heaps made from rotten shrimp, and he's there in amongst them with a shovel, trying to clear a path. It's 5 o'clock or thereabouts. He rises with the sky half dark between the junction of his curtains, weary with the aches of yesterday. The sea clothes he peeled off when he came home are slung over the chair beside the open window for an airing. His wool jumper, oiled and mangy at the chest from the persistent wiping of his hands, his trousers patched up at the knees, a shirt gone vinegary beneath the armpits. But no matter. Who'll be sniffing him except his mother and the horse?
I had read something about this one, mainly because Benjamin Wood has been championed by Johanna Thomas-Core, who's the chief literary critic at the Times. And back in June, I remember she wrote a piece about him with the headline, Britain's Answer to Donna Tartt, calling him the literary world's best-kept secret. She calls Seascraper a fiercely atmospheric novel that engages the senses. So, Elizabeth, did this one impress you?
Yes, in short. I wish I hadn't listened to it, though, because I'm a musicologist and I'm afraid that one of the things that they did on the audio, which obviously they don't do in the book, is he plays and sings the song, which is a quite central plot point and is indeed the end of the book. And in terms of its stylistic competence, it didn't fit the setting. This is set in the mid-1960s, and he is meant to be a folk-influenced guitarist. There's a folk song that gets sung in one of the scenes in the middle. And this is meant to be his response to that's a song that he supposedly dreams or hallucinates while he is having a near-death experience in which he sees his father. His father then teaches him this song. It doesn't work in audio, certainly not for me and probably not for many people who are familiar with the idiom of the 1960s. It's such a shame, really, because the rest of the book is incredibly atmospheric, very much in period. It is a historical novel set in the 60s, and it conjures up that world very well. And for me, this just broke that entirely. I don't know, it's like an iPad turning up in Wolf Hall or something.
But do you think if you weren't a professor of musicology, would it bother me, I guess is my question.
I don't know. I think on principle it might, in that there's that thing of unheard songs are sweeter. And there are lots of songs. One of the things I'm interested in is the way that songs and music get incorporated into novels, the novels not being necessarily a vehicle for sung performance in the modern period. And I think the way that songs can be conjured up so that people can imagine them according to their own knowledge and so on, it just over-concretizes, it over-literalizes the evocation of the singing in a way that I just thought was deeply counterproductive.
A Goodreads reviewer called Blair gave it 4 stars, saying it's a good balance of tension and sentiment, the sort of balancing act that only someone with Wood's talent could actually pull off. I also saw another Goodreads user called Phil Chaffee gave it 4 stars. So Phil, what did you think?
I like this a lot. I thought it was one of the most pleasurable of the entire long list to read. There's one of the ones that I picked up before the long list was even announced, entirely on the power of the cover, which we have not mentioned. I think I mentioned in the Patreon group. Is great. It's just a gorgeous cover. And I thought, it's that gorgeous, the book must be. And it is truly gorgeous.
You have to describe it, though, because people can't see it. It's a sort of misty...
It's a misty painting, I would say.
Of a man sort of plodding along the shore.
Yeah.
Is he pulling something along behind him? Is that
there's
his thing that he
there
collects
too.
the shrimps with?
Yeah.
That he scrapes the shrimps with?
And then it's just this gorgeous shoreline. And it's just, I wish I had it with me.
No, we don't have it here, unfortunately.
It's a very evocative cover. It's a very evocative book. I did feel the same. Oh, there we go. Oh, yeah, you can see a sun,
holding up
or
her
is that a
copy.
moon or a sun?
It's
Yeah.
a sun through mist, I think.
There we go, yeah.
There's the question, is it dawn or is it indeed dusk? Who knows?
And then the book is also measured through the tides. It brings you into this very different world. I do agree, even if you don't listen to the audiobook, you can go to his website and listen to the song. I did have the same impression that there's something about it. I'm not a musicologist that feels of today, even though instrumentally it could have been then. But it's still a very evocative book. It's not one that I sat around thinking about for days afterwards, but it was very pleasurable to read and it was very sweet. And yeah, this was not a debut, right? He's had more books, I'm pretty sure.
He has, yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that was really evident. One of the things I really loved about it was the way the reader is asked to put together some of the things themselves without them being too much overstated. We learn what the age difference is between himself and his mother. We can make some conclusions from that about his father, who was killed in the last years of the war, and about the fact that he has his mother's name and not his father's name, and his mother is a sort of outcast who is clearly entertaining male clients as a way of surviving in this seaside setting. So there are these understated key elements about illegitimacy and prostitution and so on. I thought it was really beautifully managed.
You also mentioned this dream sequence, and that normally just turns me off like nothing else. But for whatever reason, I thought this was absolutely gorgeous and very emotionally resonant and perfectly pulled off.
Yeah, I thought it was really beautifully worked. It's just a lovely, almost a perfect book.
And it almost gave it mythic resonances. Like it felt like we're almost not in the 1960s anymore.
Although it was very clearly also in the 1960s in an absolutely lovely way. It really had that old style. It's foggy and salty and slightly downhill.
It's interesting because so many of the things I read about this book, people were commenting on the atmosphere. And I did pull out from the interview with Benjamin Wood on the Booker Prize website. He wrote a little thing about where he wrote the book. He said, "I used to be very fussy about the conditions I needed for writing, but then I had children. Now my only requirements are a cup of coffee and a relative amount of quiet in the house. When I was working on Sea Scraper, our neighbours began some extreme building work. So I'd walk down to the Garden of Remembrance at my local church every morning with a pencil and notebook. Almost the entire book was written there in longhand on an old wooden bench. It's such a still and peaceful spot. When it rained, I'd have to sit under a big umbrella in my waterproofs all day. I'm sure this helped me to evoke the gloomy weather in Longferry with more clarity than I could have done otherwise."
That's lovely. It's a very watery book. So I think the rain definitely helped.
Okay, we must leave the fog and sea mists and move on to book 3, and that is Endling by Maria Rivas, who was born in Ukraine and then grew up in Canada. The judges said Endling shouldn't be funny, but it is very. Set in Ukraine just as Putin invades, it features 3 young women on 2 different missions in one vehicle. Structurally wild and playful, Endling is also heartrending and angry. It examines colonialism, old and neo, the role of women, identity, power and powerlessness, and the very nature of fiction writing. Maria Riva also tells a riveting, unique story. The shock is that this is her first novel. It's a book about the world now and about 3 unforgettable women, Yeva, Nastia and Solomia, travelling together in a mobile lab. The Endling, by the way, is a snail. The audiobook of Endling is narrated by Maria Riva, Max Myers and Saskia Marveld. It's published by Little Brown Book Group. Here's a clip.
Rumor had it the girl was into God. Of course she was. Sad thing. The religious ones made the perfect victims, used to bowing under threat from above. In the past, Yeva would have risen to the rescue, but she was done caring. All those earthly worries she used to have, mollusk conservation, romantic prospects, the Russian tanks amassing at the border, and how no one believed anything would come of it except Yeva, who, according to her family, was always crying wolf and blowing everything out of proportion, prattling on about the collapse of this ecosystem or that, ruining all the fun. Ruining, on behalf of barely there river turtles, the marriage agency's balloon release over the Dnipro. Blah, blah, blah. None of it mattered anymore. Even Yeva was tired of Yeva.
This is a book, my impression is, that generated quite a bit of buzz online. People love the cover, which is a cloud floating in the sky, and then you notice, oh, it's shaped like a snail. And with the ongoing conflict following Russia's invasion of Ukraine, it feels of particular significance to be reading a Ukrainian author. S. Kirk Walsh, reviewing the book for The Washington Post, says, upon an initial reading, Maria Riva's remarkable debut novel, Endling, might be categorized several different ways. A war novel about modern-day Ukraine, a metafictional tale that examines the ethics of writing about conflict and violence, a satirical send-up of the mail-order bride industry in Ukraine, a biologist's quest to save the last remaining snail of a species. Amazingly, Endling is all these things. And as the Booker judges mentioned, it's also apparently quite funny. Elizabeth, tell us more.
I thought this was really funny. It's a rollicking good read. It's a heist tale towards the end. It's also silly as well. She mentions, I think, in the credits that she was influenced by Deb Olin Unferth's Barn 8. I don't know if anyone has read that. It's a book from 2020, which I enjoyed. That's a book about...
The chickens. Is it something to do with chickens?
It is.
Yes.
It's about two US egg industry auditors who have a plot to steal 1 million chickens from an industrial chicken farm.
That sounds great, and I never got round to reading it.
It's an animal liberation heist. So this book mashes together two distinct plots. The one about the endling, so this is about the snails and trying to find a mate for Lefty, potentially the last left spiraling snail of his particular species, but also about this bride culture in Ukraine of American grooms coming over and trying to find Ukrainian brides, and protests from feminists about this. So they kidnap some of the men from this bride, Romeo and Julia, I think it's called, as a bridal agency. Those two things shouldn't work together, but I actually think there's something more interesting going on underneath all of it, which is there are two problems about writing about a war situation. And one is the thing that Peter Cook referred to when he mentioned those wonderful Berlin cabarets, which did so much to stop the rise of Hitler and prevent the outbreak of the Second World War, i.e. it doesn't work. And then there's also this problem of aestheticizing and making a subject of a beautiful work of art like a novel something which is in fact about death and destruction. And that runs up against Adorno's critique of how difficult or how barbaric it might be to write a poem after Auschwitz. And I think she tackles both of those head on by claiming, firstly, that it's culturally authentic to be funny about things which are absolutely terrible. That's a very Ukrainian sense of humour to have. And then she also tackles head on the fact of it being about surviving rather than countering adversity. It's not about preventing the outbreak of World War II, or in this case, not about preventing the invasion of Ukraine by Russia, but it's about dealing with it and surviving through that, which is obviously difficult. And it breaks the structure of the novel at precisely the point where the war happens. And that's a very suitable thing to happen. That is metafictional. In the audio, it's very interesting because the author herself intervenes vocally. So she's on the audio, and the female character, who's voiced by another actor, is replaced at certain points by the author in a way that makes that even more complex than it actually is in the written version. And I thought it was really nicely done. It's clearly a debut. It's not a perfect novel in any way. I think there were bits I found a bit boring. I found actually some of the snail stuff a bit boring. But I did think she's really got something going here, and I would definitely read something else that she wrote.
Interesting. Yes, because as I understand it, as she was writing the novel, she had one idea about what she was writing about, and then the invasion happened, and that completely then made her think, I have to write about this.
And that's pictured
it's changing like in real time.
In the process of this. And I think that's great.
Phil, what were your impressions?
Yeah, I basically second almost all of that. I struggled a lot at the beginning, which is snail heavy.
I thought the snail stuff would be the most interesting.
Oh gosh, no, it got the most tedious, and I was just like, oh god, this metaphor is just so overloaded. I also didn't love the cover. I know people do. I thought it was meh.
Controversial.
But then, as the plot picks up, then it also does the humor, and the closest analogy for me was like a Coen Brothers movie, where there's slightly something madcap about one of their heists or just escapade movies. And that tone then continues into this metafictional break. One of my favorite parts was her defense of humor in this metafictional break, which is the author, it's a bit unclear how real or not real what is recounted in that part is, but she has this back and forth with, I think it's a magazine that's publishing an article, and she's been conveying the dark humor that her Ukrainian family and Ukrainian diaspora family have about the war. And they don't want any of it. They just want misery. And there's this big tug of war over what should a Ukrainian author be representing. But it's done in a very funny interchange of letters. And that's where this did pick up for me. As Elizabeth said, it's not a perfect book. I did not find this the most fun to read. Actually, when you said the name, and I was like, wait, what was that one again? But as it comes back to me, there was a lot of rich stuff there. It was very much a first novel, but it felt very brilliant and a very fun way to take on a lot of issues, not just about war, but also representation and all these other things.
Nastia on Goodreads gave it 4 stars, saying, it started weak, but ended strong. It won me over. surprising me with its choices and refusing to provide saccharine, melodramatic answers. It's angry, chaotic, confused, hopeful, desperate, self-aware, always searching, always questioning, never offering neat resolutions. Truly a work of art. It's the biggest surprise I've had with a book in I don't know however long, and a reminder that sometimes, though very extremely rarely, you shouldn't bail on a book too early. Maybe when you get bogged down in all the stuff about snails. This is one of those unicorns. More Booker Longlist coming up, including our recommendation for the one not to miss, and some thoughts on the Booker shortlist. But first, let me tell you a little more about our Patreon community. In case you don't know of it, Patreon is a handy platform that allows people to support the creators of shows that they love and get extra content in return. You can listen via the app or in your own usual podcast player via the RSS link. And don't worry, I give you full instructions for how to set this up. Subscribers become part of the Book Club Review community with a range of benefits, including ad-free episodes of the main show. You'll also get the Book Club Review Weekend, the extra show I make just for subscribers. And you'll get full access to our chat groups where you'll be able to swap book recommendations with me and other Book Club Review listeners. Of course, we've recently been busy comparing notes on the Booker shortlist. And if you want to come and talk books with me in person at the higher tier, you can join the monthly book club. We meet on the last Sunday of every month over Zoom, which I then make into a special catch-up episode for anyone who couldn't make the live discussion. Coming up for us in November is The Anthropologists by Turkish author Ayşegül Şevas, a novel that has been described as a soulful examination of home building and modern love, written with elegance, warmth and humour, and one of Barack Obama's favourite books of 2024. I can't wait to read and discuss it. Head over to patreon.com/The Book Club Review for all the benefits and how to sign up. I would love to see you there. Right, lots left on the Booker Longlist. Let's get back to it. Next up is One Boat by Jonathan Buckley. Nice to see that beautiful blue Fitzgeraldo on the list. I was trying to work out, is this the first time a Fitzgeraldo has been longlisted?
Surely no.
I feel sure, yeah, you're right.
Olga Tokarczuk has had books on the long
But on
list.
the international,
yeah.
this is the sort of thing I should have checked in advance. I'm sorry. I will find out. Following the death of her father, Teresa returns to the small coastal town in Greece she first visited when her mother died nearly a decade before. From this scenario, tacking between the events of the second trip and memories of the first, Buckley creates a novel of quiet brilliance and sly humour, packed with mystery and indeterminacy. The judges say the way in which the book interleaves Teresa's relationship to her mother, her involvement in an amateur murder investigation, and an account of a love affair raises questions about grief, obsession, personhood, and human connectivity we found to be as stimulating as they are complex. Frances Wilson, reviewing the book in the TLS, said Jonathan Buckley's strange, sly, and self-assured novel, in which both nothing and everything happens, is about thinking and overthinking. There's a great deal of freight on board One Boat, but it packs so neatly into 168 pages that it never feels overburdened. This is a novel to be returned to as a place in which to think, just as Teresa returns to her Greek town. One Boat is narrated by Caroline Ford and published by Fitzgerald. Here's a clip.
The position of the restaurant, with tables at the water's edge, determined the choice. The waiter inquired, "Just one?" I had an undertone of sympathy. "Oh, yes," I told him, with a face that signified huge pleasure that this was so. I was aware of intermittent scrutiny. A single female diner, looking around, might be misconstrued as someone in need of company. So I took out the notebook and pen to raise a modest barrier. It signified, "Do not disturb," clearly enough. I would have thought. But it did not work. The man was intrigued. I wrote. "You're a writer?" he asked, charmed. "Lord, no," I said, and left it at that, compounding the enigma. I made a note of the sunset's colouring. I see water, almost motionless, oil-like, a superfine oil. So many colours in the surface: violet, indigo, peach, brass, dark jade. The more one looks, the more there are. Not enough names for them.
Phil, did Small Boat make you think?
Yeah. This was what I was referring to as the writer's book. It is very cerebral. It slightly reminded me, possibly because of its setting, of Outline, the first of the Rachel Cusk trilogy, but less narrative based than that one. Very much sort of an English protagonist in Greece, digesting heartbreak grief in this case, via the foreground action in Greece. I don't know. It was also fairly forgettable. It also gets a bit meta at the end in the final part, and I didn't really know what that was doing. It was also a novella, so you can also read it in a couple hours. So it was fine. I'm getting a very middle of the road review. Maybe you have different thoughts.
I had two totally different thoughts because I read it twice. And I did this because the first time I read it, I think of my notes I wrote, I don't care about this book. I hope they don't shortlist this nonsense. Thank God it was short. And then I had an exchange with one of my colleagues, a guy called Ollie Chandler, shout out to Ollie. And he was like, oh, but the metafictional reveal at the end suddenly made you rethink all of it. And it just made it all completely different. And I was like, really? And it is a bit metafictional at the end. Basically, she gets home and presents her musings. Throughout the book, she's sitting in squares and writing things in her notebook and comparing it to things she wrote in her notebook on her previous visit. And then we get her presenting this as a story that she's going to tell, and she gets critiqued on what is included and what is not. And much of the critique was stuff I agree with. Don't have that dream sequence in there. No one cares about people's dreams in novels.
Phil hates a dream sequence.
I hate dream sequences as well. So lots of the things that I was hating about it were mentioned explicitly at the end. And I was like, this is too little, too late. It's not enough for me. But it's a short book, so I thought I'll give it another go. And by the point I read it the second time, the audio was out, because previously I'd only read it reading it. And listening to it on audio, I took in a lot more of the details, obviously because I was reading it a second time, even though I'm hearing it. And I thought it was far less boring the second time. And that's partly because this metafictional reveal is coming up. So you pay attention to, it's a different kind of attention that you pay to it. So instead of finding her conversations with Petros about whether the whole world is conscious and ensouled, as, yeah, whatever, or whether his poetry is just space typing, instead of being bored by her dalliance with this Nico guy, you start to think this is actually a reflection on the selective nature of memory. It's about whether you're a character in somebody else's book. There's something really deeply meaningful about it on the second reading. I'd completely forgotten about loads of the details. There's a lot of beautiful descriptive prose. I did look him up, the author, because he's written a lot of books and I'd never read anything by him before. I'd never even really heard of him. And I read a lot of books, but I'd never heard of him, which is crazy. Apparently he was the director of the Rough Guides, so he's definitely up for writing touristy prose.
Wrote Venice and the Veneto. And then, yes, he then went on to work in the publishing house and be in charge of the whole series. So I was interested in that little detail as well.
So all of that is to say that I absolutely agree with Phil. This is a writer's writer. I was prepared to read it a second time because it was short. I think it was well worth it to do so. I still got slightly bored, but not until around chapter 11 or 14, whereas I got bored quite a lot earlier from the first reading. I think I'm actually going to keep hold of it because I might reread it again. And for me, that is a sign that I think that there's something here that has intrigued me. I think I would recommend it, but only to people who like that kind of thing.
It's so interesting, isn't it? What a different experience it is reading something for the second time where you're not reading it for plot. I often have been struck by this. And interesting to note that for any book that makes it to the long list of the Booker,
They'll have read it.
They will reread these things. And then by the time it's a shortlist, they'll have read it 3 times. And it's often interesting the way that it does then. It's those books that can withstand that process of being read more than once that are the ones that hold up.
This has got such beautiful writing in it. Some of the descriptions, you get a real visual sense of the scene. You get a real sense of the atmosphere of this Greek coastal town. It is absolutely beautiful. And if you're prepared to sit with it and read it slowly, because you have read it before and you're not reading for plot, then it's actually a very enjoyable experience.
It's also structurally, beyond this metafictional part at the end, it takes a while to figure out what's going on because it's toggling between 2 different visits that the narrator has separated by a decade or something, right?
Yeah, 9 years, I think.
9
I found that
years.
really confusing when I first read it. Did
Yeah.
you find it confusing?
It just took a while. You were like, wait, what? And like, but eventually there's some markers where you're like, oh, this is where we are. But yeah, it's not really spelled out. That's what's happening. You have
There's
to figure
two
it
different dogs. There's a dog in the past and there's a dog in the present. And the same guy has the dog, but they're different dogs.
This is very interesting. Over on Goodreads, Stephen the Bookworm gave it 4 stars, saying, "This is a book that will divide readers, a joy or a frustration. This is a book that needs to be revisited. This review could certainly change after a second read, as a more insightful response could be uncovered." So yeah, he was on the right track there. Meanwhile, Daryl Sweet was one of those who found it frustrating. "Honestly, I hated this. Extremely tedious, empty philosophical musings. Stayed up late last night to finish and then went on to have the most miserable sleep." So 2 stars from him. Okay, on to Universality by Natasha Brown. The judges say Natasha Brown's Universality is a compact yet sweeping satire, told through a series of shifting perspectives. It reveals the contradictions of a society shaped by entrenched systems of economic, political, and media control. Brown moves the reader with cool precision from Hannah, a struggling freelancer, through to Lenny, an established columnist, unfurling through both of them an examination of the ways language and rhetoric are bound with power structures. We were particularly impressed by the book's ability to discomfort and entertain, qualities that mark Universality as a bold and memorable achievement. The audiobook of Universality is read by Anushka Chakravarti, Claire Corbett, Daniel Wayman, and Norma Butikofer, and published by Penguin. Here's a clip.
He's garrulous, keen to detail the many ways his life has been turned into an absolute shit show. An overly indulgent, even selfish comment, perhaps. After all, since the pandemic swept across the globe in 2020, many people have suffered badly, losing their lives and loved ones. Spencer is alive and well. His loved ones are safe, though possibly not reciprocally loving at this moment. But Spencer has lost something significant: his status. Back in 2019, all the excessive fruits of late capitalism were his. He owned multiple homes, farming land, investments, and cars. He had a household staff, a pretty wife, plus a much younger girlfriend. As a high-powered stockbroker at a major investment bank, he enjoyed immense power, influence, and wealth. He had everything. Now, stripped of all that, he has become the man across from me, a grounded giant, cut off from his castle in the sky.
This is the only one on the long list that I have read, and that's because we did it for the podcast book club. Elizabeth, you must have missed that one.
Yes, I think that was a week that I couldn't come. I read her first novel. I know you liked it.
Assembly.
Yeah, I was not such a fan. I could see its qualities. I felt slightly berated by it and also found the prose kind of underwhelming. So I didn't actually want to read this. This is one of the ones I didn't get round to reading on the long list because it really didn't grab me at all. And having heard the book club discussion, I felt vindicated.
Yes, because all book clubbers get a catch-up episode for anyone who couldn't make the live session. But yes, feeling like if you didn't much like Assembly, then I really don't think Universality is the book to win you over. Interestingly, I read the book, I discussed it, I made a podcast on it, I remember telling Laura about it, and yet, looking back on it, I found I was struggling to really remember. Not that much has stayed with me. What I remember is it starts with this long-form article that's been written in quite a clickbaity way. And that article is about a banker who bludgeoned a member of an anarchist movement squatting on his farm with a gold bar. It's attacking the wealthy elite, but really it's looking at the media and at the clique of people who write these stories, this insular world, and what their agenda might be. And more broadly, the people then who consume those stories, who are us, the reader. So you feel it's both entertaining, but also you feel a bit complicit in the thing that she's critiquing. So it's an uncomfortable read. It made for very interesting book club discussion. Phil, what did you think of it?
I like this. I also liked Assembly a lot. I gather there's been a lot of blowback on this one. It did feel a bit like a sophomore novel. But yeah, I thought these themes were all very fascinating. I think Natasha Brown, particularly after Assembly, was viewed as this public intellectual. She got thrown into media society in a way that makes these reflections very interesting.
Yeah, because we should say she came into the literary world from banking. She's been
very
quite
successful.
happily having this banking career.
And she might go back to it.
Yeah. And even now, she's like, I'm just going to do this book and then I'll go back to banking. But yeah, so it was really interesting and surprising that suddenly someone could come along who wrote so beautifully and had such interesting things to say.
Yeah, and it is a slightly cartoonish book, even when you get past the opening article. Lenny is a cartoonish character, but those cartoonish characters, crazy right-wing columnists, like they exist. They are out there in the world. And I feel like some of the criticism of this book is unfair. I think she's tackling a lot. I don't think it's a perfect book, but I thought it was really fun to read, really interesting. It made me think about particularly British media in interesting ways. And I thought it was very rich. I will read everything she writes, but I was even disappointed it didn't make it to the shortlist.
That is interesting. I think because it's written in this quite choppy style that feels like a clever representation of the way that we consume media now. But the trouble is, in this traditional form of a novel that made for a bit of an uncomfortable read, it felt quite fragmented. And the other problem, maybe because it's a satire, but there just aren't any characters who draw you in. There aren't any characters you care about or can root for. And so while I thought intellectually it was interesting, it didn't engage my heart in any way, which is what I'm always hoping for. But I did think it made for a really good, interesting discussion book. So it's nice to see it on the long list. We must move on. The South by Tash Ao, who was born in Taiwan, raised in Malaysia and educated in England. The judges say it's summertime in the 1990s and rural Malaysia is hot. Teenager Jay and his family leave their home of Kuala Lumpur to work on a farm in the Johor Bahru countryside. There, Jay meets Chuan, who opens Jay up to friendship, illicit pastimes, and a deeper understanding of his sexuality. To call The South a coming-of-age novel nearly misses its expanse. This is a story about heritage, the Asian financial crisis, and the relationship between one family and the land. The South is the first instalment of a quartet, and we're so pleased that there is more to come. The South is read by Winston Leong and published by Fourth Estate. Here's a clip.
Seized by something between fear and indecision. What will he discover if he looks at the other boy now? Turn around, Jay. Turn around. But he is unable to move. He finds that his body has become foreign. For so many years, he has yearned for someone to touch him in this way, for the freedom he will experience. He imagined the clarity of the joy he would feel, how he would savor every gesture. Maybe he is afraid of this liberation and what it might lead to. It is the first time he has felt his body slipping away from his control. In the future, there will be other occasions in other places far from here, and he will grow accustomed to it. But for now, this sensation is new. I hope we can save these trees, he says again, looking skyward. On the lower branches, he sees a large bird that he cannot identify. A tiny hawk or an oversized cuckoo. It's hard to tell against the light. The bird is looking back at him, studying him. He wonders if this is a good omen or a bad one.
Laura Feigl, reviewing the book in The Guardian, said Ao has moved beyond his previous novels to discover a different kind of writing here, emerging as a Proustian chronicler of momentary bodily and mental experience, writing on a compressed, exquisite scale. Perhaps he will follow Proust in using his newly revealed capacity for blending the timeless and the historical to reinvent what an epic can be. Ao has been longlisted twice before for previous books. There's clearly something about his work Booker judges love, but not enough to put him on the shortlist. Phil, you're the only one of us who has read this one, so what did you think? I'm always wary of anything that's part of a series. How can you judge a book that's going to be a quartet based on just one volume?
I like that. I have no problem with that. I read this book way before, like at the beginning of the year, so way before the long list was announced. I have no idea what that reviewer was going on about Proust. Yeah. It's evocative. There's like very nice descriptions of the Malaysian countryside. This was a completely unmemorable book. I have vague memories of all of that stuff, but only if I really dredged. Nothing stuck. There was not a lot of plot. There was not a lot of emotion. Yes, there was some coming of age. Yes, there was this queer love story. But Proust does a lot more than just some evocative prose. And
you're fresh off a
I also
Proust.
just finished, yes.
Yeah.
So it just seems like a preposterous comparison. Proust is like painfully long. This is also short, and what is the point? It's also setting up a quartet. So maybe I'll go back and reread this and read all four, because I don't think I'm doing it justice, and I probably was distracted while reading it. But yeah, this in my mind was the most long listy of the long list that obviously was never going to make it to the short list.
Interesting.
And this is why I chose not to read it, because the description that you read makes it sound like my kind of thing. I would definitely read this book, but I don't want to read the first of a quartet at the point it comes out, because I would like to be able to go on and read the rest of it. I don't want to read part of a series. So that really, for me, would be too frustrating. It would either be, as Phil has described, unmemorable, and then I'd feel I'd have to reread it anyway when the other ones come out, or it would be so great that I'd be so frustrated that the next ones were not available. Either way, it's just not something I wanted to put myself through.
I feel the same. One of my favourite Goodreads reviewers, who we have featured on the pod quite a few times because both Laura and I like this person's reviews so much, Roman Clodia, gave it 3 stars, saying, "There's a gentle, almost elegiac and melancholy tone to this male coming-of-age story set in Malaysia, but I found it disappointingly similar to many other adolescent stories, even with a queer love story at its heart. I think this writing style doesn't work for me. It feels almost distanced with indirect speech and lots of telling. I don't need a plotty book, but I do want some kind of direct engagement with the characters, and here they felt distanced, as if I was viewing them from behind a curtain. Without anything distinctive in either the narrative style or the story itself, this ended up being quite bland for me, sadly forgettable, and with nothing much to get a hold of. This sort of dissipated even as I was reading."
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, she bears you out. She's great. And we come to our final book of the 7, which is Love Forms by Claire Adam. The judges say Claire Adam returns to Trinidad for her sophomore novel. We first meet Dawn, a pregnant 16-year-old, on a clandestine journey across the sea to Venezuela. There she gives birth and returns home without the baby, just as her parents had prescribed. Now, at 58, Dawn is the divorced mother of 2 adult men, but the loss of the baby girl consumes her every move. The story, heartbreaking in its own right, comes second to its narration. Dawn's voice haunts us still with its beautiful and quiet urgency. Love Forms is a rare and low-pitched achievement. It reads like a hushed conversation overheard in the next room. The audiobook of Love Forms is read by Melanie Labarry and published by Faber. Here's a clip.
Pull the tacks from my little pink frame corkboard on the wall. All my revision schedules, exam schedules, my friends' phone numbers, my motivational sayings handwritten on little scraps of paper. I took them all down from the corkboard and crumpled them up. Then, with nothing else to do but wait, I sat on the floor, my elbows on my knees, leaning against the side of the bed. Only my mother was at home with me that afternoon. I don't know how she passed the time. We didn't speak. At some point, I heard her footsteps downstairs. She slid the patio doors shut and then turned the key in the lock. I heard her pull the curtains shut too. I don't know what made her do that. It was only afternoon. But maybe she was possessed by the same feeling of shame as I was, and the sense that a part of our lives was coming to an end. Or maybe she was just like me, filled with the same nervous energy, her hands searching for things to keep busy with, to help pass the time.
So I might not have managed to read this one, but I did happen to go to an Authors Club event where Claire Adam was the star of the show. She was there being interviewed. And I can report back that she is very charming, very funny, more than a little starstruck by Sarah Jessica Parker, because she selected her book to be published by Hogarth Press. And she had really personally championed it. And so as a result, Claire Adam had been doing this whirlwind tour of things like The Late Show in the US and being in the spotlight. So I wasn't surprised to see this on the long list. The question is, did it deserve to be there? Elizabeth, what did you think?
I thought it was good. I'd be interested to know if she was describing her book and mentioned the title, whether she thinks of forms as a noun or a verb. Is it love forms or is it love forms?
This sounds like such a bookery question.
I know, but it bothered me as I was reading through. I was like, is this about the formation of love retrospectively for this child that she has and gives up? Or is this about the shapes that love takes in one's life? I found it quite an evocative title and it made me ponder certain things. I actually really enjoyed this. This was the first one from the long list that I read. I have a thing about Trinidad, which is I'm really interested in it as a place. I read Ingrid Persaud's Love After Love, which I really enjoyed. C.L.R. James, obviously, is a much older author from Trinidad who's really interesting in lots of ways. I thought this was really evocative, really beautifully written. And it's the first person narration of this woman who's given up her baby and then ends up being middle-aged and seeking for the child that she lost. And I like an unreliable narrator. She is deluded about her feelings, and she's also reinterpreting her deluded feelings from her childhood too. When she was younger, she thinks that certain things are threatening to her, like having the baby would be threatening, so that's why she has to give it up. And then as she's got older, she realizes that the person who was really threatening to her was her father, who was the lion from whom she should have protected her child, is one of the things that she says about him. She's an interesting character because she's not entirely likable and she has a lot of contradictory opinions about things. She is eventually divorced from her husband of the two boys that she has in London, and yet she's really going on and on to one of her sons about how he needs to get married because you've got to have a companion to be with you all the way through life. And this becomes a sort of big argument between the two of them when she's clearly not exemplifying that life choice herself. And that sort of issue of people's life choices and how they think about constraining other people's life choices is really quite interesting. I think this would make a great book club book. And it has a really tear-jerking last scene as well. I'm not normally one who gets a bit weepy at books, but I definitely shed a tear in the last few pages.
As you were talking, I was thinking this sounds very emotional. Phil, what did you think of it?
I liked it. The Ingrid Persaud comparison I had in my head, obviously just because of Trinidad, I found that more emotionally resonant. This one, I feel like I've read a lot of books about this subject matter. They're mainly Irish. This one, there was something about the stasis. For most of the book, she's at the exact same place where she has been contacted by someone who might be her daughter and she doesn't know. And there's lots of jumping around temporally and it fills in pieces. But there is something about the emotional stasis of that narrative that I found therefore hard to penetrate emotionally. With all that said, the descriptions, the visual resonance, it was up there with Sea Scraper. And you get these amazing evocations of Trinidad and northern Venezuela. There's this amazing scene towards the end where she, this isn't a spoiler, in Venezuela of unlocking her memory. And it's just incredibly well done. Yeah, I liked it. I don't think I didn't come close to a tearjerker for me.
I was interested in this review from Rita Egan, who gave it 3 stars. And she said, "This is a beautiful story told with such grace. I listened to the audio and the narrator is truly exceptional with her vocal performance of the various Trinidadian accents and the precision of her tone and emotion. I have 2 close friends whose stories this could be. One, the poor girl who either made a mistake, bringing shame to her family, or took a wrong turn in life and got lost. The other, very nearly that little baby, disposed of and dispossessed by those who thought they were cleaning up a problem. Everything in this story resonates authentically." And she says, as a bonus, the fabulous settings of Trinidad and Tobago and Venezuela and their historical and cultural vagaries. Then she concludes, "While this novel moved me in so many ways, I question its place as a contender for the Booker Prize. It seems too accessible, too linear, too uncomplicated, given the usual standards." Okay, to wrap up, I think there's only one question. If listeners were to read only one book from the long list, from the also-rans, which do you think it should be? Elizabeth?
Oh, I'm torn between Love Forms and Sea Scraper. I think they're both really readable. For me, my favourite one, I think, is probably One Boat, but I think that's probably a Marmite book. So I think I'd probably have to go for Love Forms. I think most people would enjoy that. it is about loss of all kinds. Lost her marriage, she's lost her children leaving home, and then she's got this much more historic loss of this baby, which is quite viscerally felt in her 50s. It's a novel about a woman in her late 50s, so I think that's also quite an unusual narrative choice, and it's a very emotionally engaging book, so I think I would recommend that to people as something to read.
And Phil, how about you?
I'll go with Sea Scraper. I would happily push that into most hands.
Yeah, I was intrigued by that one. I feel like I would enjoy that one. I have to say, based on everything you've said, I was most interested by One Boat.
Really?
Yeah, I thought that sounded good.
And I am slightly inspired to go read it again, Elizabeth, because it sounds like the experience is just so different.
Yeah, I recommend it. I was surprised. I was adamant that it was no good the first time I read it, and I totally revised that view. But you've also persuaded me I should read Universality, so maybe I should go and do that.
I think it's the book clubber in me. I just want to work out what I think about that book. Thank you so much, both of you, for being here and for doing so much reading. It's just great. I've loved hearing your thoughts on these books, and now I feel like we haven't left any stones unturned. And the final question, just off the tops of your heads. You've both read most of the shortlist now, I think. Any early feelings about the winner?
Oh, gosh.
Potential winner?
Hernan Diaz.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I have yet to read
Hernan
it,
Diaz
actually.
should win. I mean, it's long, it's an epic, it's a lovely love story. It's just beautiful, and there's nothing not to like in that book. I also think it's the sort of book that when the paperback comes out, it will be everyone's favourite beach read. It's a great take it on holiday. It's a very quick read as well, given its length, because it's just so absorbing.
I'm very excited. I have yet to read it.
I know, me too. I'm so looking forward to reading that one. I was trying to start with the ones I wanted to read least, and then I would save the ones I was really excited about to the end. But actually that proved a really disastrous strategy, because all I was doing was procrastinating about picking them up. So now I've gone the other way. I'm reading the ones I want to read most, just to try to get myself into it. Anyway, all of that is to come, but thanks so much to both of you for spending this time with me now.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's nearly it for this episode. You'll find all the books mentioned in the show notes. Don't forget, you can sign up for ad-free episodes, the Book Club Review Weekend, our chat groups, read-alongs, and Podcast Book Club over on Patreon. Head over to patreon.com/The Book Club Review for all the details and how to sign up. You'll find the link in the show notes. And a reminder about that special offer code for any Serious Readers HD Essential Reading Light. Head to seriousreaders.com/BCR and use the code BCR at checkout. You'll find the link in the show notes. To keep up with the pod between episodes, you'll find me on Instagram at Book Club Review Podcast, or drop me a line anytime at thebookclubreview@gmail.com. If you want to do a kind thing, help me spread the word about the show. Tell your friends, post about it online. You can leave a review on your podcast platform or share the episode on your social media channels. Tell your favourite bookseller. Taking a moment to do this might not seem like much, but it makes a huge difference in helping the show reach new listeners. I meet people all the time who I think might enjoy it, who've never heard of it, so I'm incredibly grateful to everyone who helps spread the word. We're now in that last gasp of reading for our Booker Prize shortlist show, which we're recording on prize night, and I'm then planning to edit like a demon so I can get the show out to listeners as soon as I can after that. Phil's coming back, and we're joined by friend of the show and Booker completist Martin Vogue. And Laura will be dialing in from Vancouver. I can't wait to find out what they all thought, and of course, which book is the one.
There can be only one.
But for now, thanks for listening, and until next time, I wish you happy reading.